And Barack won by a landslide, getting 158 votes. That was at least 90 more than any other candidate, both Democrat and Republican. And this is because Indianola high school students, just like young people all across the country, are going to go out and caucus for Barack because they know that he has the experience and ability to lead our country into change for a brighter future. So I would now like you all to meet the next President of the United States of America, Senator Barack Obama.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. First of all, I want to thank Peg and Laura for their great work. Give them a big round of applause. We are so proud of them. Any precinct captains here, raise their hands. Give them a big round of applause. They're the campaign. I didn't originally live in Chicago. I moved there after college because I wanted to work at a grassroots level to bring about change. And there were a group of churches who had formed an organization to help steel workers who had lost their jobs when the plants closed. And so for 3.5 years I worked as an organizer, setting up job training programs, after school programs, and trying to bring economic development to the community. And it was great work because it taught me ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they're given a chance. You know, you're underpaid, you're underappreciated. You know, you're underpaid, you're underappreciated. You know, you're underpaid, you're underappreciated. And just don't be bashful, show of hands. How many people are still undecided? All right, you guys see? There's some live ones in here. All right? Now you know who your targets are. So, you know, I've been traveling all across the country running for president. And it's been an extraordinary journey because you have a chance to have a conversation about their hopes and their dreams and their aspirations. Part of what's been extraordinary is the size of the crowds we've been attracting. 10,000 people in Iowa City. And it's not just the size of the crowds, but it's the makeup of the crowds, because there are people from all walks of life. You've got people of every religious background, every racial group. We've got Democrats and independents, and yes, we even have some Republicans. I know this because they whisper to me when I'm shaking hands. Barack, I'm a Republican. I support you. And I say, thank you. Why are we whispering? They know this is a big one. A lot's at stake. And that next year they will be walking into the voting booth and choosing the next president of the United States, and they know that the name George W. Bush will not be on the ballot. They know that the name of my cousin, Dick Cheney, will not be on the ballot. Some of you read about that. It's very embarrassing. And when they do these genealogical things, and you're hoping you're related to George Washington, or Willie Mays. So, what's next for America? What's next for America? Because it's not good enough just to be against something. We need to be for something. And I think all of us understand we're at a defining moment in our history. Our nation is at war. The planet is in peril. And the dream that so many generations of Americans fought for feels like it's slowly slipping away. Slowly slipping away. Slowly slipping away. You've seen it in your own lives. People are working harder and harder just to keep pace. They've never paid more for health care, college, never paid more for gas at the pump. Some are using credit cards just to pay the monthly bills. Some have seen those credit cards max out. They've taken out home equity loans. Now housing prices are going down. People are struggling. People are struggling. People are struggling. And no wonder they've lost faith. You think about the promises that were made 8 years ago. We were promised compassionate conservatism, and we got Katrina and wiretaps instead. We were promised a uniter in the White House. They wouldn't even lead the half of the country that voted for them. We were promised a more ethical Washington. And instead we have a town that's more corrupt than it was before. And the only mission that was ever accomplished was to use fear and falsehoods to take this country into a war that should have never been on. Not just Democrats, but Republicans and independents who also want to believe that we can make government work again. And that's why this is a moment of great challenge, but also a great opportunity. Because we have the chance, like we maybe haven't had a chance in a generation, to finally come together in a working majority and tackle those problems that George Bush may have made worse, but that had been lingering long before George Bush ever took office. Through Democratic and Republican administrations, families are paid 78% more on health care than they were just 7 years ago. Why is that? The drug companies and the insurance companies spent $1 billion in lobbying and campaign contributions and PR to prevent reform from happening. So it shouldn't be surprising then that the laws coming out of Congress have been very good for those industries, but not so good for you. But not so good for you. Same is true when it comes to energy. We've been talking about energy independence at least since Jimmy Carter. Since 1973, we've been saying every year, we need energy independence. And yet, year after year, nothing seems to change. Every single year, our imports go up, price of gas goes up, and ExxonMobil's profits go up. I know it's really upsetting. It's true. Every year. It makes me want to cry sometimes. Big change. Why is that? Because Bush put Cheney in charge of energy policy. He met with the renewable energy groups once. He met with the oil and gas companies 40 times. 40 times. Not so good for you. And this is why people understand in this election, it's not enough just to change political parties in the White House. We've got to change how business is done in Washington. We've got to change how politics works. I find it interesting when people say, vote for me because I know how to work the system in Washington. The system's not working for us. The system's not working for us. The system's not working for us. You hear people say, vote for me, I know how to play the game better. We don't need somebody who knows how to play the game better. We need somebody who will put an end to the game playing and start putting the American people's agenda front and center in the country. That's what we need. We're going to do this different. We're not going to take PAC money. We're not going to take federal lobbyist money. We're going to organize at the grassroots. Telling the American people what they want to hear instead of what they need to hear just won't do. Think about big change, not small change, not incremental change, big change. Republican, Independent, Democrat, but I'm a proud Democrat, and when I think about what makes me proud in this party, the party of Jefferson and Jackson, of Roosevelt and Kennedy, we have led not by polls but by principles, not by calculation but by conviction. And that's the party we need to be right now. That's why I'm running for President of the United States of America. We've been having roundtable discussions. Another person who's, after a lifetime of working, there are millions of stories like that, all across the country, all across Iowa, right here in this auditorium, doing the right thing, but still having a tough time making ends meet. And Americans are proud. I don't meet any Americans who say, I want government to solve all my problems. And they know the government may not be able to do it all for them, but government should be able to help, knock down some of the barriers standing in the way between them and their American dream. And they're right. So, I'm running to let the corporate lobbyists know that their days of setting the agenda in Washington are over. They have not financed my campaign. They will not run my White House, and they will not drown out the voices of the American people when I'm president of the United States of America. And by the way, I don't intend to just raise the minimum wage, every 10 years. Can actually get out of poverty if they're working full time. If you are working in this country, you should not be poor. If you are working in this country, somebody who represented not just Wall Street, but also Main Street. If you are working in this country, you should not be poor. And there are millions of people who are in that situation right now. We need to create a minimum wage that lifts everybody out of poverty if they're doing the right thing. I'm in this race about the outrage of 47 million people without health insurance. I want to start doing something about it. This is personal for me. My mother died she never got a chance to see her grandchildren, of cancer when she was 53 years old. And that's tragic enough. What compounded the tragedy in the last months before she died, and the insurance companies were saying, maybe there's a pre-existing condition, and so we don't have to reimburse you for your medical care. I know what it's like to see a loved one suffer, not just because they're sick, but because of a broken healthcare system. I remember watching her on the phone arguing with the insurance companies, and it was wrong. And that's why, as president, I'm going to make sure that every single American has health care that is at least as good as the health care I have as a member of Congress. And we are not going to wait 20 years from now to do it, and we are going to do it by the end of my first term as president of the United States of America. It is long past due that we fix a broken health care system in this country. I'm in this race because I want to make sure every child gets the best education we have to offer. From the day they're born, I didn't have rich parents. I didn't have a fancy name. I am where I am today because of an education, and every child deserves one. That's what opportunity and upward mobility is all about in this country. I didn't have rich parents. And make sure every child is prepared to learn when they walk into that classroom. We got to stop talking about how great teachers are and actually reward them for their greatness. And I won't pass a bill called No Child Left Behind and then leave the money behind. And I won't have our teachers teaching to a standardized test every single day that excludes art, excludes art and music and literature, that excludes art and music and literature and all the things that are so important for a well-rounded education. I'm running because I'm tired of us sending $800 million a day, most of it to nations that are hostile to us because of our addiction to foreign oil. If we invest in biofuels and alternative fuels, we can grow. Imagine what that would do for our economy and our environment, but also for our national security. If we increase fuel efficiency standards on cars to 40 miles per gallon, we would save the equivalent of all the oil we import from the Persian Gulf, all of it. And by the way, when I made that proposal, I tell the American people the truth. Tell the American people the truth. I'm running because I'm tired of politicians thinking the only way to look tough on national security is to act and talk and vote like George W. Bush. My job as Commander-in-Chief will be to keep you safe. I will do everything I have to do to keep you safe. I will never hesitate to act forcefully and swiftly against those who would do us harm. And that means, by the way, preserving the finest military in the history of the world and making sure that the young men and women who are at the core of that military are provided proper training and proper equipment and are treated with the respect and the dignity they have earned when they come home after they've made their tours of duty. But a part of it is also having a commander-in-chief who's using our military wisely, precisely because it's such a precious resource. And that means making sure that when we go into war, we know why we're going into war and how we're going to get out. And that is why I opposed the war in Iraq. And that's why I will bring this war to a I will finish the fight against Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. That's where we should have been focused on in the first place. These folks are the ones who killed 3,000 Americans. I want to restore an understanding of the role diplomacy plays in keeping us safe. This is why I've said I will talk to everybody when I'm president, also to our enemies. When I made this argument, I got in an argument with Senator Clinton. She said, oh, no. That would be naive. That would be irresponsible. Listen to John F. Kennedy, who said we should never negotiate out of fear, but we should never fear to negotiate. Strong countries and strong presidents talk to their adversaries and tell them where America stands, try to resolve their differences without resort to war. And when we do that, when I do that as president, I believe the world will once again see us as a leader. I will restore habeas corpus because we are not a nation that locks people up without charging them. We are not a nation that ships people out to be tortured in the dead of night. We're not a nation that wiretaps. We're not a world that's not who America is. And we need to restore the traditions of civil liberties here in the United States of America. I'm running because of what Dr. King called the fierce urgency of now. I believe there's such a thing as being too late. I believe that moment is almost upon us. I don't want to pit red America against blue America. I want to lead the United States of America. You know, I'm standing here for the same reason I went to Chicago so long ago, to work for jobs for the jobless. For the same reason that I turned down the lucrative corporate jobs after graduating from law school to work as a civil rights attorney for equality. For the same reason that I fought for Illinois families for over a decade. I know the only reason I'm standing here is because somebody, somewhere, sometime stood up for me. My family stood up for me. My grandfather, part of Patton's army in World War II, fighting as part of that great arsenal of democracy. That greatest generation, they stood up for me. My mother, single mom, raising 2 kids, going to work, going to school at the same time. She stood up for me, but not just my family, strangers. Going down south, marching, going to jail, sitting at lunch counters, so that I could be standing here today. All of us, there have been previous generations who stood up. Women who stood up so that all women could have the right to vote. Workers who stood up so that all workers could have the right to organize. Because one person stood up, a few more people stood up. And then a few thousand people stood up. And then a few million people stood up. Standing up with courage and conviction, they somehow managed to change the world. Thank you so much. Thank you. Now, we have time for some questions. And lay right in the middle there. And we've got I think, do we have some microphones? Because since it's so crowded. I'm just curious, by the way, what's this moat doing here? It's like, are the students savages here, or it's the artists with I'm teasing. You watch these TV ads, you don't know what the drug's for. People are running around in fields, they're looking happy. Except for that one drug. I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to have a big table. And we're going to have everybody sitting at the table. We're going to have doctors and nurses and hospital administrators, patients advocates, employers, labor. I will let the drug and the insurance companies have a representative at the table. They just won't be able to buy every chair. And I will sit down, and I will have the biggest chair. Big, comfortable chair.